The instant my mother-in-law tapped her wine glass and declared to the entire restaurant that my husband would be handling the bill for all 14 guests, 3 bottles of expensive red wine, and the prime rib everyone had ordered without a second thought, something inside me went completely calm. Not the panicked stillness of someone caught off guard, but the quiet certainty of a woman who had already made up her mind and was simply watching events unfold the way she knew they would. My name is Cora, and I have been married to my husband Owen for 3 years. Before that, we dated for 5 years of loving a man who has never quite managed to choose honesty over his mother. I'm 31 years old. I'm a licensed CPA. I've been managing the financial records of 11 small businesses in our city since I was 26. I mention this not to impress anyone, but because it is genuinely relevant. It matters that I understand exactly how money moves. It matters that I can look at a bank statement the way most people read a casual text message, completely, instantly, without missing a single detail. His mother's name is Lorraine. She's 63, retired from nothing that I could ever clearly identify, and has spent the better part of a decade treating her son like a personal funding source. When Owen and I became serious, I assumed I had misread her. She brought wine to our first dinner together. She embraced me at Christmas. She told me, and I remember the exact words because I've turned them over in my mind countless times, that she was so relieved Owen had finally found someone grounded. I understand now that grounded was her word for financially stable. She wasn't complimenting my character. She was assessing my usefulness. It began with small things. It always does. A dinner covered here, a car repair absorbed there. Owen's younger sister Tiffany had a baby and needed a crib, and somehow the charge landed on our shared credit card. I brought it up once. Owen said it was family, that Tiffany was struggling, that it wasn't worth making into an issue. I let it go. That was my first mistake, and I made it with full awareness, and I have been paying for it ever since. By the second year of our marriage, Lorraine was calling Owen twice weekly with a new emergency. The roof needed work, her homeowners association dues were overdue, she had found a cruise deal too good to ignore, and only needed someone to cover the deposit until her next Social Security payment, which arrives in full every single month and is spent entirely on things that are not roof repairs or association fees. I started keeping a spreadsheet. That's what I do when something troubles me. I document. Over 2 years, Owen had sent just over $19,000 from our shared accounts to his mother and his sister. $19,412. I have every transaction recorded, every date, every amount, every merchant. I have the 3 times Lorraine contacted me directly asking whether I could cover something for her, and the 0 times she ever repaid me or acknowledged any of it afterward. Owen knew I was aware of some of it. He did not know I was aware of all of it. The birthday dinner was Lorraine's idea, her 63rd, at a steakhouse in the city I won't name, but which charges $48 for a side of truffle macaroni and cheese. She had invited 14 people, most of whom I barely recognized. Cousins, friends from her book club, and a neighbor named Gerald, who arrived wearing a bolo tie and consumed 2 appetizers before the bread even reached the table. Owen mentioned the dinner to me 2 weeks before, very casually, in the way he mentions things he has already decided. He said his mother wanted to celebrate in a big way this year. He said it would be a lovely evening. He did not say he intended to pay for everyone. He didn't need to. I already knew. What he didn't know was what I had done 3 days earlier. I want to explain this carefully because it matters, and because I need you to understand that nothing I did was impulsive. I am not an impulsive person. I had been thinking about that moment for 4 months. I had spoken with a family law attorney, not because I had decided I wanted a divorce, but because I believed I deserved to understand what was legally mine. I had quietly opened a new checking account at a completely separate bank, not our credit union, not our shared account, an entirely different institution. I had redirected my direct deposit there 6 weeks before the birthday dinner. I had paid off and closed my portion of the joint credit card. And on the evening of the dinner, before we left the house, I slipped my new card into my clutch and left the joint card sitting on my nightstand. Owen didn't notice. He was too busy ironing his shirt and talking to Tiffany on the phone about what time she was arriving. The restaurant was warm and loud in that particular way upscale places are on Saturday evenings. Lorraine was already there when we arrived. already midway through a glass of champagne, already commanding the conversation at the head of the table in a sequined top she had clearly purchased for the occasion. She lit up when she saw Owen. She gave me a sideways hug, the kind where only our shoulders made contact. I sat down, I smiled. I ordered the salmon. For 90 minutes, I simply watched. Lorraine ordered for the table without asking anyone. She told the server they would be dining family style and then listed dishes based entirely on her own preferences. She refilled her wine before anyone else's glass had been touched. She told the same story about a trip she had taken to Sedona in 2019 three separate times, and each retelling grew slightly more embellished. Owen laughed every time like it was the first. Then the plates were cleared and Lorraine tapped her glass. She thanked everyone for coming. She said family was the most important thing in the world. She looked at Owen with that particular expression I had watched her use for years. Not quite admiration, more like proprietorship. And she said it was time to settle the bill and that her son always took such wonderful care of her. She laughed. Everyone laughed. It was a performance polished enough to have been rehearsed. Owen reached across the table toward my clutch, the way he always does when a bill arrives. We had fallen into that habit early in our marriage, his hand extending, my bag opening, never a word exchanged. I had once believed that was what partnership looked like. I had been mistaken. He opened the clutch. He pulled out the card. I watched his expression as he carried it to the card reader the server had brought to the table. I watched him insert it. I watched him enter the amount. The screen turned away from me, though I already knew it would be somewhere above $800 because I had done the arithmetic in my head. From the menu, before we ever sat down. The machine beeped. Not the soft, clean tone of approval, the other sound. The short, flat, indifferent beep that means no. Owen looked at the screen. He removed the card and tried again, more slowly, the way people do when they're hoping the machine is simply confused. It beeped again. Lorraine leaned forward slightly. Everything all right, honey? Owen's jaw tightened. He came back to the table and leaned close to me, voice lowered. The card isn't going through. Do you have another one in here? Which card is that? I asked. He showed me. It was the joint card. I looked at it for a moment. Then I looked up at him. That account is closed. He stared at me. What? I closed it a few weeks ago. Across the table, Lorraine had gone completely still. She has the hearing of a woman who has spent decades tuned into any conversation involving money. Owen straightened. His voice was controlled, but barely. Cora, what are you talking about? I can explain later, I said, but that card won't work. He glanced around the table. 14 people. Gerald with his bolo tie. Tiffany bouncing her baby on her knee. All of Lorraine's book club friends who had eaten well and emptied the wine bottles and were now watching with the bright attention of people who sense something is about to happen. Do you have another card? Owen asked. Yes, I said. He held out his hand. I looked at his hand. I looked at his face. 3 years of dinners, deposits, transfers, spreadsheets, and a $19,000 gap in our savings. One conversation I had with myself at 2 a.m. 6 months earlier, asking how much longer I was willing to continue. I do have another card, I said calmly, but I'm not going to hand it to you to pay for this dinner. Someone at the table inhaled sharply. Lorraine set down her wine glass. Excuse me? I turned to look at her directly, without anger. I want to be clear about that. I was not angry in that moment. Anger would have required energy I had been carefully saving. I didn't say I wouldn't pay. I said I wasn't going to hand it to Owen to pay. I stood up, smoothed my dress, and walked over to the server myself. I handed her my card, the new one connected only to my account, and I asked her to run the full amount. Owen followed me with his eyes across the room. When I returned to the table, his expression had shifted from controlled to something closer to frightened. Lorraine spoke first. Well, she said, with the tone of someone attempting to reestablish authority, I suppose that's one way to make a scene at your mother-in-law's birthday dinner. I haven't made a scene, I said pleasantly. I just paid the bill. You humiliated my son. I paid $847 for your birthday dinner, Lorraine. I'd say your son came out perfectly fine. Tiffany made a sound somewhere between a laugh and a cough, then pressed her lips together. Lorraine's chin rose. After everything this family has done for you, after the way we welcomed you. And that is where I stopped her. Not unkindly, I simply said, I have a spreadsheet. She blinked. I beg your pardon? I keep records. It's what I do professionally. I reached into my clutch, the same one Owen had searched moments ago for a card that no longer existed, and I took out my phone. I had the document saved as a PDF. I had prepared it not because I had planned specifically to display it at a birthday dinner, but because I have learned that documentation should always be close at hand. $19,412. That is what Owen and I have directed toward your expenses, Tiffany's expenses, and 2 other family requests over the past 2 years. I have every date, every amount, every account it was drawn from. I placed the phone on the table, screen facing up. So when you say after everything this family has done for you, I would genuinely welcome hearing what that refers to, because I have been tracking the other side of that ledger for quite some time, and I can tell you with complete professional confidence that it does not come close to balancing. The table was silent in a way that 14 people almost never are. Owen sat down slowly. Cora, I'm not finished, I said quietly. I meant it without cruelty. I'm not doing this to embarrass anyone. I'm doing it because I have been silent for 3 years, and silence has not accomplished anything. So I am trying something different. Lorraine looked at her son. Are you going to allow her to speak to me this way? Owen opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. And for the first time in the 5 years I had known him, he did not come to his mother's defense. I don't know whether it was the spreadsheet, or the closed account, or simply the experience of standing in a restaurant in front of 14 people with an unpayable bill that had finally made real to him what I had been trying to make real for 2 years. But he said nothing. I picked up my phone, I sat back down, I finished my water. Lorraine left 20 minutes later, before the server returned my card. She kissed her book club friends goodbye, thanked people for coming, and walked out without looking at me once. Tiffany gathered her baby and her diaper bag, gave Owen a long, meaningful look that clearly meant we will be discussing this, and followed her mother out. Gerald stayed for the complimentary birthday sorbet the restaurant brought, and seemed to enjoy himself thoroughly. On the drive home, Owen was silent long enough that I thought he might not speak at all that night. We were nearly at our exit when he finally said, "You could have told me." "I did tell you," I said. "Twice in the first year, once in the second. You said it was temporary." He was quiet again. "The account. When did you close it?" 3 weeks ago. "Were you going to tell me?" "Yes, after tonight." He absorbed that. Are you leaving?" he asked. I thought about how to answer honestly. "I don't know yet," I said. "But something has to change. Not eventually. Not after the next emergency. Something has to change now, and I need to know that you understand that. And I need to know that you mean it." He didn't respond for some time. When he did, what he said was, "The 19,000. I didn't realize it was that much." "I know," I said. "That's part of the problem." The following morning, I emailed Lorraine a copy of the spreadsheet. Not to cause pain. I included a note of 3 sentences. It said I had no interest in being her adversary. It said I would be glad to have a relationship with her built on something other than access to her son's finances. It said that if she chose to respond, I was open to a conversation. She read it. I could see the receipt. She did not respond for 11 days. When she finally did, it was a text message rather than an email, and it contained 4 words. "We should talk soon." I didn't reply right away. I made her wait 2 days, not out of spite, but because I had a full week of client work, and also because I had learned somewhere between the spreadsheet and that birthday dinner that my time has value. It always has. I had simply stopped conducting myself as though that were true. Owen and I have been in couples counseling for 6 weeks. Our therapist is a composed, precise woman whose name I'll keep private. And she has a way of posing questions that makes dishonest answers nearly impossible. Owen has said things in that room I did not expect to hear. I have said things I did not expect to say either. I don't know yet whether our marriage survives this. I think that's an honest answer. I think that's all right. What I do know is this. The evening I handed my own card to that server and paid $847 for a dinner I hadn't chosen at a restaurant I hadn't selected for a birthday I hadn't been consulted about. That was the last time I paid for something I had not agreed to. Not because I issued some declaration, not because I won an argument, but because I had moved my money and gathered my documentation, and when the moment arrived, I was simply ready. I don't need everyone at that table to understand what I did. I only needed to stop pretending that I didn't understand it myself. There is a particular kind of exhaustion that comes not from working hard, but from working hard for people who never once consider whether you might be tired. I know that exhaustion intimately. I lived inside it for 3 years, and the strange thing is, I didn't fully recognize it until the night it lifted. What happened at that birthday dinner was not luck. It was not coincidence. It was the direct result of a straightforward equation I had finally stopped ignoring. Every action accumulates. Every transfer Owen made without consulting me. Every dinner Lorraine assumed I would fund. Every time I said nothing and paid anyway. Those were not isolated moments. They were a pattern, and patterns do not dissolve on their own. I had to decide to dismantle it, and then I had to actually do the work of dismantling it. That is the part that rarely gets discussed. The doing. It is easy to be angry. It is easy to feel wronged. What is difficult is sitting at your kitchen table at 11 at night, opening a spreadsheet, and entering every transaction with the same precision you would bring to a client's accounts. What is difficult is scheduling a consultation with an attorney before you even know exactly what you want, simply because you believe you are entitled to understand your own situation. What is difficult is opening a new bank account, redirecting your direct deposit, and telling no one, not out of deception, but out of the clear understanding that your financial security is yours to protect, before anyone else's. That is what I mean when I say I used my head. Not coldly, clearly. Lorraine was not a villain in someone else's story. She was a woman who had learned over many years that specific behaviors produce specific results. She asked, and Owen paid, and no one ever said stop. I was part of that system. I allowed myself to be. Sitting with that reality, genuinely sitting with it rather than simply being angry about it, was what separated reacting from actually changing something. And then there was the matter of holding firm. Because on the night of that dinner, when Lorraine lifted her chin and said I had humiliated her son, every habit I had spent years building told me to soften things, to apologize, to smooth it over and deal with the real conversation later. I didn't. Not because I felt no fear, because I did, but because I had made a decision and I had the documentation to support it. And I finally understood that retreating in that moment would have cost me far more than the $847 I had just spent. Acting on what you know to be right when it is genuinely uncomfortable is not something certain people are born with and others aren't. It is a capacity that develops through use. I had let mine weaken. Lorraine's red receipt sitting unanswered for 11 days didn't wound me the way it would have a year earlier, because I had finally stopped measuring my own worth against how quickly someone chose to acknowledge me. I don't yet know how my marriage ends. I know how that evening ended. I paid my own bill, said what was true, and walked out into the night air, feeling recognizably like myself for the first time in a very long time. Whatever comes next, I built that. No one handed it to me. I documented it, prepared for it, and when the moment came, I did not look away. That is the only thing I would want anyone to carry away from this. Not resentment toward Owen, not judgment of Lorraine, just this. Know your numbers, trust your own clarity, and when you have done the work, do not apologize for it.